Seat 14B was never sold, yet a mysterious woman sat there, unlocking secrets no one dared to reveal. Join us as we dive into a story of mystery, courage, and hidden truths. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get started. The airport was quieter than usual, that strange in-between hour past midnight when time seemed to stall and only the hum of janitorial machines and the occasional crackle of the intercom reminded you that you were still awake. Emily Carter tugged her duffel bag over one shoulder and trudged down the jet bridge toward Flight 228, bound for Atlanta. Her scrubs were wrinkled from the shift that had stretched into 12 hours, and her legs ached from being on her feet the entire time. All she wanted was to sink in her window seat, close her eyes, and not speak to another soul until the plane touched down. She handed the gate agent her ticket with a tired smile and boarded the aircraft, her steps slow as she scanned the rows. Row 14, left side, window seat, 14A. She exhaled in relief when she saw her row approaching. But as she reached it, her breath caught. Someone was already sitting in 14B. A little girl. She looked no older than 8, wearing a faded blue dress with small flowers stitched near the hem. Her black hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she sat perfectly still, staring out the window with her hands folded neatly in her lap. Emily blinked. She glanced again at the row number, 14A and 14B. Yes, she was in the right place. But that seat, 14B, wasn't supposed to be taken. She had checked the seat map when she booked the ticket. The row was practically empty. "Hi there," Emily said gently, hoping the child's parent was nearby. "I think you might be in my row." The girl didn't respond, didn't even glance at her, just continued to stare out the window like she hadn't heard a thing. Emily hesitated, then turned toward the aisle. A flight attendant in her late 20s was helping someone with an overhead bin. Emily caught her attention. "Excuse me," Emily whispered. "Sorry, this is weird, but I think there's a child in my row. I'm in 14A. She's in 14B. The attendant frowned and pulled a small device from her pocket, scanning it quickly. 14B, she repeated, tapping at the screen. "Hang on." Her brow furrowed deeper. "That's strange." "What's strange?" Emily asked, her voice low. "That seat wasn't sold. It's listed as empty on the manifest. There shouldn't be anyone there." "Well," Emily said uneasily, "someone's there." The attendant stepped toward the row, leaning slightly to look. Her mouth opened and then closed. A blink. She stepped back quickly. "Let me. Just a moment," she said, composing herself. She ducked back toward the galley and out of sight. Emily turned to the girl again. She still hadn't moved, still hadn't blinked. Maybe she was just shy, or tired, or maybe she was just a weird kid, Emily reasoned. She sighed and slid into 14A, careful not to disturb her silent seatmate. The girl didn't flinch. As the plane filled up, other passengers boarded, stowing luggage and settling in. No one seemed to pay any special attention to the child. No frantic parent looking for her. No one asking if she'd gotten lost. A man across the aisle, in 14C, gave a casual glance in their direction, but nothing more. Emily stared at her hands, rubbing her thumb along a small blister near her knuckle. She was probably overthinking it. The airline had probably made a glitch. The seat was sold after all, and the kid just didn't want to talk. Maybe her parents were sitting somewhere else. Or maybe... Emily! She froze. Her head snapped to the left. The girl was still staring out the window. Still hadn't moved. Her mouth hadn't opened. But Emily had heard it, clear as day. A whisper. Her name. And no one else on this plane should have known it. A chill traced its fingers down her spine. Emily tried to brush it off. The whisper could have come from a passenger nearby. Maybe someone listening to music with the volume too loud. Or maybe she just imagined it. She hadn't slept in almost 24 hours. Fatigue could do things to a person's brain. She shook her head slightly, exhaled, and leaned back into the headrest, but her eyes kept sliding back toward the girl beside her. The child hadn't moved. Not once. She just kept her gaze fixed on the window, though there was nothing but the faint glow of the tarmac lights outside. No tablet. No toys. No blanket. She had nothing with her. Not even a carry-on. That in itself was strange, but Emily didn't want to stare. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to shake the unease. The flight attendants were doing their final walkthrough. People were still adjusting their seatbelts. A few were chatting quietly. One row behind, a man coughed into his sleeve. The usual airplane soundtrack, but all of it faded beneath the silence pressing in from her left. Emily shifted slightly. "Hey," she said softly, turning her head just a bit. "Are you okay?" No answer. She tried again, this time with more warmth. "Is your mom or dad sitting somewhere else? Do you need help?" Nothing. The girl didn't even blink. Her hand stayed folded in her lap, too still for a child her age. Emily had worked with kids before, as a trauma nurse. Kids were never this still, especially not alone. Something was wrong. Before she could decide whether to flag a flight attendant again, the pilot's voice came over the speaker, calm and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 228 with nonstop service to Atlanta. We're just finishing up the final checks, and we'll be taxiing out in just a few minutes. Please ensure all carry-ons are stowed and your seatbelts are fastened." The usual pre-flight buzz continued. The plane's cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft prepared to back away from the gate. Emily looked toward the front galley, hoping to catch the eye of the flight attendant she'd spoken earlier, but she was nowhere in sight. Everyone else seemed content, unaware. Emily leaned back, casting one more glance at the girl, who remained eerily still. With a sigh, she gave in to exhaustion and rested her head against the seatback. She just closed her eyes for a few minutes. The hum of the engines began to rise. The plane moved. Outside the window, the lights of the airport blurred into lines. As the aircraft accelerated, Emily drifted into that strange halfway place between waking and sleep, suspended in engine noise, warm air, and dimmed lights. Then came the whisper again. "Emily." She sat up straight, heart pounding. The girl still hadn't moved, but Emily's name had come again. Softer this time, but unmistakable. She glanced at the aisle, but everyone else was focused forward. The man across the row was already nodding off, mouth slightly open. Emily whispered, "Did you just say something?" She turned to the girl, gently this time. The girl slowly turned her head, and for the first time, looked at Emily. Her eyes were dark, wide, and oddly still. There was no emotion in them. No fear. No curiosity. Just presence. It was like staring into something far too deep for a child. Emily swallowed. "Can you tell me your name?" The girl said nothing, just looked. After several seconds, she turned back to the window. Emily sat frozen, her breath shallow. Something was off. Deeply off. The kind of off her instincts couldn't explain, only recognize. Then the girl did something small, but chilling. Without a word, she reached out and gently touched Emily's hand. Her fingers were ice cold, not just chilly ice. And then she turned back to the window like nothing had happened. Emily sat perfectly still, her hand tingling from the touch. She looked around again. No one was paying attention. Everyone else saw nothing unusual. But Emily knew now, with a strange certainty, the girl beside her wasn't just shy. She wasn't just tired. She was something else entirely. 30 minutes into the flight, the cabin had settled into its usual mid-air quiet, an odd sort of hush broken only by the occasional rustle of a magazine, a cough, or the hum of the engines. Emily sat stiffly in her seat, arms folded tightly across her chest, her mind cycling in relentless loops. She hadn't moved since the girl touched her hand. She could still feel the lingering cold on her skin, like an imprint that wouldn't fade. She glanced again to her left. The girl was still staring out the window, unmoving. No blinking, no fidgeting, just silence. Something inside Emily told her she had to say something, had to tell someone, but part of her didn't want to seem unhinged. She was a rational person. She had worked trauma shifts, seen horrific injuries, stayed calm through codes and death. She didn't rattle easily. But this wasn't normal. After a long breath, she tapped the call button above her head. Within seconds, a flight attendant appeared from the galley. A woman with auburn hair pulled into a tight bun and a name tag that read Grace. She gave Emily a patient smile. "Yes, ma'am. What can I help you with?" Emily hesitated, lowering her voice. I don't want to make a scene, but earlier I mentioned there was a child sitting in 14B. She's still here. Grace's smile faltered. I understand. Could you excuse me for a moment? She glanced toward the seat beside Emily, and for just a flash, something flickered across her expression. Not fear, something closer to confusion, maybe concern. She turned away and walked quickly toward the front of the aircraft. Emily watched her go, her heart thudding louder than before. Grace reappeared minutes later with a tablet in hand, the soft glow of its screen lighting her face. She scrolled, her eyes narrowing as she studied the digital manifest. She stopped beside Emily's row and glanced down again at the girl in 14B, who hadn't shifted once. Grace took a small breath. Ms. Carter, she said quietly, I double-checked the digital log, and the manifest confirms seat 14B was never sold. According to our system, it's empty. Emily turned slowly toward Grace, her voice low and tense. She's right there. Grace's lips parted as if to reply, but she looked toward the seat again. Her face drained of color. There's no one sitting there, she whispered. I'm sorry, Emily said, her chest tightening. I'm looking at her right now. Grace leaned down slightly, squinting, and then blinked. It's empty, ma'am. No, it's not. Emily snapped, louder than she intended. A few heads nearby turned. She's sitting right. She turned to the girl and froze. The seat was empty. Where the girl had been just seconds ago, there was now nothing. Just a neatly folded seatbelt. No child. No trace. Just an impossible, gaping absence. Emily stood up abruptly, twisting around in her seat, scanning the row, the aisle, the floor. Nothing. Grace put a gentle hand on her arm. Ma'am, are you feeling all right? You saw her, Emily said, her voice tight. She was here. She touched me. I promise you, no one boarded with that seat number, Grace said gently. I'm not crazy. Of course not, Grace said quickly, but her tone had shifted, soothing, like she was talking someone down. It's been a long day. If there's anything I can get you, water, maybe a blanket, she whispered my name. Emily's voice cracked. She knew my name. Grace's eyes held hers for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and walked back up the aisle. Emily sank back in her seat, her hands trembling. She looked down at the floor, and there, half tucked under the seat in front of her, was something soft and worn. A stuffed bunny. Small, with one floppy ear and dirt-smudged fabric. It hadn't been there before. Emily picked it up slowly, heart pounding. She turned it over in her hands. It was old, faded. A name was stitched along one foot in tiny, careful letters. Lily. The girl was real. Emily hadn't imagined her. But she was gone. And now, she'd left something behind. Emily couldn't take her eyes off the stuffed bunny in her lap. She ran her fingers over the stitched name. Lily. The thread was frayed, the fabric matted from years of love and handling. It wasn't just old. It was beloved. And she was certain, absolutely certain, it hadn't been on the plane when she boarded. She would have noticed. The cabin around her had returned to a low murmur of conversation and the occasional clink of a soda can. The flight attendants moved casually through the aisles, checking seat belts and closing overhead bins. No one else seemed disturbed. No one else seemed to notice that a little girl had vanished from a seat that officially never existed. Emily wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. Maybe the girl had slipped away to the bathroom. Maybe the toy had fallen from someone else's bag and just landed near her feet. But none of that made sense. No one had walked past her. And the name, Lily, it matched nothing she'd heard, but it felt important. And what chilled her more than anything was the memory of that whisper. Her name spoken with clarity and purpose. Not just sound, recognition. She clutched the bunny closer as a voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we are expecting some light turbulence over the next several minutes. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. As the plane jolted gently, a ripple of movement passed through the cabin as passengers settled in and checked their belts. Emily glanced to her right. The seat next to her was still empty. Visibly, physically, undeniably empty. She tightened her buckle and held onto the armrest as the turbulence began to intensify. The plane shuddered slightly, then dipped, causing a collective gasp from several rows. Overhead, bins rattled. A baby 2 rows back began to cry. The lights flickered, just briefly, but enough to draw worried glances. A deeper rumble shook the plane again. Emily's heart pounded in her ears. Then came the unmistakable sensation, cold. Not just the usual blast of air-conditioned air, but a dense, unnatural chill that seemed to crawl across her skin. She turned slowly, her breath catching. The seat beside her, 14B, was no longer empty. The girl was back. She was sitting exactly as before, her hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes fixed straight ahead, her small face utterly still. The turbulence continued, but Emily barely noticed now. Her pulse thundered. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. The girl slowly turned her head toward her dark eyes locking onto Emily's with something that felt heavier than a child should carry. Something ancient, something knowing. Emily tried to speak, but her throat had gone dry. The girl leaned forward slightly, her lips parting, and then, very softly, she whispered, "Don't trust them." Emily blinked. "Oh," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The girls gazed and shift. She simply repeated it. "Don't trust them." And then, she vanished. It wasn't like before. It wasn't a slow, blink and she's gone moment. This time, she faded like mist, her form dissolving into thin air, leaving the seat belt twisted in a way that suggested she'd never been there at all. Emily stared at the now empty seat, her body frozen. The turbulence eased. The plane steadied. The cabin lights brightened slightly. The flight resumed its unnatural calm, as if nothing had happened. But everything had. Emily opened her hand and looked down at the bunny. It was still there, solid and real. A warning, maybe, or a clue. And her mind clung to the girl's final words like a lifeline in a sea of madness. Don't trust them. She looked around the cabin, eyes scanning every face. Who was them? The crew? The passengers? Was the girl trying to protect her, or warn her of something worse? Suddenly, the friendly voice of the captain echoed once again over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be cruising smoothly the rest of the way. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." But Emily didn't relax. She sat rigid in her seat, gripping the bunny in her lap, heart hammering, eyes open wide. Because now she wasn't just tired. She wasn't just curious. Now, she was afraid. Emily sat frozen, her fingers wrapped tightly around the stuffed bunny, as if it were the only thing tethering her to reality. Around her, the cabin was a picture of ordinary mid-flight life. Passengers scrolling through phones, headphones plugged in, drinks on tray tables. But for her, the normalcy felt like a thin mask over something much darker. The air still felt cold, heavier somehow, like the pressure around her had changed in a way only she could feel. The girl had said, "Don't trust them." The words echoed again and again in Emily's head. She had seen the girl, touched her, heard her, and now she was gone, like mist in the wind. Yet the stuffed bunny, Lily, remained as real as anything she'd ever held. Emily turned the toy over again in her lap, staring at the name stitched into its foot. The thread was worn, but unmistakable. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to find answers. She unbuckled her seatbelt, rose carefully, and moved toward the front of the plane. A few heads turned, but no one said anything. The aisle was narrow and felt strangely longer than before, like each step took more effort than it should have. She reached the galley and found Grace, the red-headed flight attendant, pouring coffee into paper cups. Grace looked up, smiling, but the smile faded when she saw Emily's face. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Emily lowered her voice. "I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." Grace nodded, cautious. "Of course." Emily held out the bunny. "Have you ever seen this before? Was it in the Lost and Found? Did someone leave it here earlier?" Grace looked at the bunny, and her brow furrowed. "No, I haven't seen it. Where did you get it?" "It was under my seat. After—" Emily hesitated. "After the girl disappeared." Grace blinked. "The girl you think was in 14B. Emily looked her straight in the eye. "She was there, Grace. I saw her. She spoke to me. She said my name. Then she vanished, and This was left behind. Grace hesitated. Look, Emily, I believe you think you saw something, and I don't want to dismiss that, but I checked the manifest myself. Nobody was assigned to that seat. It's officially unoccupied. That's the problem, Emily whispered. She wasn't on the manifest, but she was on the plane. Grace looked around, as if making sure no one was listening, then lowered her voice. We've had reports, over the years. Strange things. That seat, 14B, it's been flagged before. But there's never any evidence. Nothing solid. You've seen her too? Emily asked. Grace shook her head. No, but other passengers have. They say they saw a little girl sitting there. Just like you. Then she disappears. Some say she talks to them. Others say she just stares. Emily stared. And what do you do when that happens? We report it, Grace said quietly. But nothing ever comes of it. The airline logs it as passenger fatigue or stress-induced hallucination. But we remember. The crew talks. What's her name? Emily asked. Do you know who she is? Grace shook her head again. No one knows. There's no record of a child going missing on any of these flights. At least, not officially. Emily looked down at the bunny again. Her name is Lily. Grace's eyes widened. How do you know that? Emily turned the foot around and showed her the stitched letters. It's embroidered. I didn't imagine this, Grace. This is real. Grace reached for the intercom handset, her fingers trembling slightly. I'm going to call the captain. Maybe he can. But before she could finish, a sound interrupted them. A whisper. Not loud, but clear, and unmistakably close. Both women froze. The whisper was a child's voice, soft and sad. I'm still here. Grace's eyes met Emily's, wide and terrified. Did you hear that? Emily nodded. She's not gone. And suddenly, the lights flickered again, and from down the aisle, a few passengers began murmuring, looking around. The calm was breaking. Whatever presence had visited Emily in silence was now making itself known. And it wasn't finished. The air inside the cabin had shifted. It was more than turbulence now. There was a thickness to it, as though the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. Emily and Grace stood frozen near the galley, both listening, both shaken. The whisper, I'm still here, had not been imagined. It was real. Emily could feel it in her bones. Grace picked up the intercom handset again, but hesitated. We can't announce anything, she said quietly, her voice shaking. If we scare them, it could cause panic. Just go back to your seat. I'll talk to the captain. Emily didn't argue. Clutching the bunny to her chest, she turned and made her way back down the aisle. As she passed the rows of passengers, she caught glimpses of curious eyes and hushed conversations. They had heard it too. Something was happening. She sat down in 14A and stared at the seat beside her. 14B, still empty, still taunting her. She gritted her teeth. She wasn't losing her mind. She knew what she saw, what she heard. As she sat there trying to gather herself, a man across the aisle caught her eye. He was older, maybe late 60s, with thick gray hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. He wore a corduroy jacket over a button-down shirt and had been scribbling in a worn leather notebook since takeoff. Now, however, he wasn't writing. He was watching her. Their eyes met, and he gave her a small nod. Then he leaned toward the aisle and said, She came to you too. Emily's heart skipped. She leaned in. You've seen her? The man closed his notebook gently. Once. A long time ago. Different flight. Same seat. He gestured with his chin toward 14B. She sat right there. Looked me dead in the eye. Said my name. What did she say? Emily asked. She asked me to help her, he replied. But I didn't understand what she meant. By the time I worked up the courage to speak to someone, she was gone. Vanished. Just like that. What did you do? I reported it to the airline. They brushed it off, called it a dream or high-altitude confusion. But I never forgot. I started researching, collecting accounts. There have been others. He leaned closer. Always C14B. Always a girl. Always a warning. Emily felt a chill race down her spine. Why that seat? No one knows, he said. But it goes back decades. Some of the earliest reports I've found are from the late 80s. Different airlines. Different routes. Same exact details. Who is she? That's the mystery, he said softly. Some think she's a ghost from a crash that was covered up. Others think she's trying to prevent something. A guardian of sorts. She told me not to trust them, Emily said. The crew. He shook his head. I've never figured out who she meant. Could be the airline. Could be the passengers. Or something deeper. Emily looked at the seat again. She left this. She held up the bunny. His eyes widened. That wasn't there before? No. It just appeared. He nodded slowly. She's reaching out to you. You need to listen. What should I do? She asked. The man's gaze turned serious. Keep watching. Pay attention. She doesn't come to everyone. If she chose you, it's for a reason. Emily leaned back in her seat, the bunny still in her arms, and let her eyes scan the cabin again. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. She could feel it, an unseen thread pulling everything tight, just waiting to snap. The man across the aisle went back to scribbling in his notebook, but every now and then he'd glance up at her with a look that said, "You're not alone in this." And for the first time since the plane had taken off, Emily felt something beyond fear. A flicker of resolve. The girl in 14B had chosen her for a reason. And whatever that reason was, she was going to find it, even if it meant uncovering a truth no one else dared to believe. Emily sat still, the cabin noise blurring into the background like distant waves as her mind worked furiously to connect the pieces. The bunny, the girl, the whisper, the man with the notebook. Seat 14B. She kept turning the bunny over in her hands, as if somehow the worn fabric might give her more answers. She had to know who the girl was, why she was appearing, and what "don't trust them" truly meant. The answer had to be somewhere on this plane. She glanced across the aisle again. The man, his name tag read Harrison D. Cole, she noticed now, was scribbling intensely. She leaned over. "Mr. Cole," she said, lowering her voice, "do you have a passenger manifest?" He looked up and tilted his head. "No, but I might know how to get it." "Why?" "I need to see if anyone else has a connection to the girl, or if she's ever appeared to someone on this exact flight." "That's smart," he said, nodding. "Wait here." He stood slowly, walked up the aisle with the measured calm of a man used to sneaking under radar. Emily watched him go. Her heart beat faster. She hadn't dared to ask for the manifest herself. Grace had been helpful, but even she seemed limited in what she could share. Harrison disappeared into the galley, and for a moment, Emily thought he might not come back. But a minute later, he returned, sliding into his seat and passing her a folded paper under the aisle-side armrest like it was contraband. "Don't ask how," he whispered. "Just be quick." Emily unfolded the manifest and scanned the names. Her own was listed at 14A. Seat 14B, blank, just as Grace had said. The airline system didn't recognize anyone seated there. But Emily knew someone had been. She flipped through the list again, line by line, looking for anything out of place. Then her eyes caught it. Row 19. Seat 19C, Lillian M. Reed. Her breath hitched. Lillian. Could that be her? She checked again. 19C. That was a few rows back, right aisle side. She rose and walked down the aisle slowly, heart pounding in her chest. When she reached row 19, she looked down. An elderly woman with soft white hair sat in the window seat, dozing gently. The middle seat was empty. In a 19C sat a young woman, mid-30s, maybe, with dark hair pulled into a bun, reading a paperback. She looked up as Emily stopped. "Hi. Sorry to bother you. Are you Lillian Reed?" The woman blinked, clearly surprised. "Yes. Did you ever lose a stuffed bunny? One with your name on it?" Lillian stared at her. "What? No, I don't think so." Emily hesitated. "When you were little." Lillian paused, then slowly put her book down. "Actually, I think I did. A long time ago. It was white, with pink ears, and my name embroidered on the foot." Emily held up the bunny. "Like this." Lillian's eyes widened, her hand going to her mouth. "Oh my God. That's it. That's my bunny. I haven't seen that in over 25 years. Where? How did you get it?" Emily sat in the empty middle seat between Lillian and the sleeping older woman. She lowered her voice. "It was left under the seat in 14B. I saw a little girl there. She vanished. This was all that was left." Lillian's face paled. "Wait, 14B. That's where she's Saturday." "Who?" "My little sister," Lillian said softly. "Lily." She died when I was 8. We were on a plane, a short flight. I remember we had a layover and changed planes, and she didn't come with us. They said she wandered off, but I swear, I saw her walk back onto the jet bridge. No one believed me. My parents were frantic. They shut it all down. The airline said it was impossible, that no one matching her description ever boarded. Emily felt chills rise across her skin. Do you think she's been trying to reach you? Lillian's eyes filled with tears. I don't know, but if she's on this flight, and she reached out and touched the bunny, her fingers trembling. Then she remembers me. Emily leaned closer. She said, "Don't trust them." Lillian nodded slowly. "Then we need to find out who she means." The two women sat together in silence for a moment, the past and present blurring into one, bound by the ghost of a girl and the mystery of seat 14B. Emily and Lillian sat close, the weight of Lily's name hanging between them like a presence neither could fully explain. The humming of the engines felt muted now, almost distant, like the whole plane had shifted into some liminal space that existed between reality and memory. Emily's thoughts raced as she clutched the bunny, her mind flicking back to that whisper. "I'm still here." It wasn't just a message. It was a plea, a call. Lily didn't just vanish, Emily said finally. She was taken, or hidden, or something happened. Something the airline didn't want anyone to know. Lillian nodded, her face pale but resolute. "I always felt that. My parents were told to keep quiet. Lawyers visited us within hours. There were settlements, NDAs. It all happened so fast I barely understood it. They said she must have walked away in the terminal, but that never made sense. She was only 5. She was holding my hand before I boarded. And the seat, 14B, Emily said. It's not a coincidence. She was there. Her memory, her energy, it's attached to it. She's tied to something about this plane, or this route, or this airline," Lillian added grimly. Emily sat back, thinking. Harrison Cole had said he'd gathered reports, dozens of sightings of the same girl in the same seat over the years. If Lily was reaching out, it meant there was still something unresolved. And now, with the bunny returned, and Lillian unexpectedly on board this exact flight, it felt like a thread was being pulled tight. "We need more," Emily said. "Something concrete, not just memories and sightings." She stood, steadying herself as she walked back to Harrison's seat and whispered, "We found her name. Lillian. She's her sister." Harrison's eyes widened behind his glasses. "That's impossible. She's on a plane. Row 19. She remembered the bunny. She remembered everything." Harrison blinked, stunned. "I need to show you something." He reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out a flash drive. This contains audio from a cockpit voice recorder, one from a flight in 1997, a red-eye from Portland to Dallas. No one knows how it leaked, but someone sent it to me anonymously a few years ago. There was never a reported crash. But this audio, it suggests something happened. Emily took the flash drive, her heart hammering. "Can we play it?" I asked a friend in maintenance to patch my laptop into the in-flight Wi-Fi. He's a tech guy, former avionics engineer. I told him I was researching old aircraft systems. He helped me bypass some security. "You hacked the plane system?" "Lightly," Harrison said with a sly smile. "Just to access playback. Nothing dangerous." He opened his laptop and clicked through several encrypted folders before pulling up an audio file marked PX 379_CVR_1997_ unconfirmed. Emily and Lillian leaned in as he hit play. The file crackled to life with the static-laced sound of cockpit chatter. At first, it was routine, pilots discussing altitude, checking weather conditions, logging coordinates. But then, at timestamp 2314, a child's voice broke through the background. "Seat 14B," the voice said, eerily calm. The pilots paused, confused. "Say again," one of them asked. Then again, the child's voice, louder. "There's a girl in 14B. She's not supposed to be here." One of the pilots cursed. "Who the hell is that?" The audio spiraled into chaos. Warnings blaring, engine fluctuations, the sound of scrambling, one pilot shouting, "Get her out. She's not on the manifest. She's the recording cutoff." Static. Silence. Emily's skin crawled. Lillian's hands were pressed to her mouth. Harrison shut the laptop. No official record of that flight ever being in distress. No incident report. But someone went to great lengths to erase this. That voice, Emily whispered. It was her. It was Lily. Lillian nodded, her eyes glassy with tears. She was trying to warn them. And now she's warning us, Harrison said gravely. Whatever happened on that flight, it didn't end. It was buried, but she's still fighting to be heard. Emily stared at the seat across from her. 14B remained empty. But in her heart, she knew Lily wasn't gone. She was trying to stop something. Something that hadn't happened yet. Or something that was about to happen again. Emily's mind raced as the weight of the cockpit recording sank in. The chilling voice, the frantic panic, the sudden cut-off. It was more than just a ghost story or an urban legend. It was a piece of a hidden puzzle, a fragment of a truth buried under decades of silence. She looked over at Lillian, whose hands still trembled, clutching the bunny like a lifeline to a lost sister. "We need to get to the cockpit," Emily said firmly. "We need to know everything. Maybe there's more evidence, more clues." Lillian nodded, swallowing her fear. "I want to know what really happened to Lily. I owe her that much." Harrison joined them quietly, pulling a small notebook from his bag. "I've been compiling information from pilots and flight crews who've encountered this anomaly. They've hinted at restricted cockpit logs and secret maintenance records, but no one's ever dared to look too close." The trio moved cautiously down the aisle. Passengers were still murmuring about the strange events, some glancing nervously at 14B, now a seat loaded with unspoken meaning. Grace caught their eyes from the galley, her expression torn between concern and fear. She gestured subtly toward the cockpit door. "I'll cover for you," she whispered. The door hissed open as the pilot and co-pilot stepped out briefly, stretching. Emily felt her throat tighten. This was her chance. Harrison pulled a small device from his pocket, a high-tech lockpick that resembled a slim flash drive. "I'm not proud of this," he muttered, "but we need in." The lock clicked with surprising ease. Inside the cockpit, the air smelled of electronics and stale coffee. The flight controls gleamed under dim lights, and the digital displays blinked steadily. Emily's eyes scanned the room, landing on the control panel labeled Flight Data Recorder. Harrison tapped his device against the panel. "This should let us access more than just the usual playback." Lillian moved closer to the co-pilot's seat, her voice barely a whisper. "Lily, where are you? Help us understand." Harrison's device hummed softly. Suddenly, screens flickered, displaying encrypted files labeled with dates and flight numbers, some from decades ago, others surprisingly recent. "Look at this," Harrison said, pointing to a file dated 2 years ago. "It's a report of an incident on this very flight path. Same plane model, same time of year." Emily's breath caught. "What happened?" Harrison opened the file. The report described unusual disturbances, unexplained loss of communication, strange sightings of a child in seat 14 be reported by flight attendants, and a pilot's journal entry expressing deep unease. The final line was chilling. Subject vanished without trace. No official investigation. Classified. Emily looked at Lillian. They've been hiding this forever. Suddenly, a soft sound came from the cockpit speakers. The same faint whisper Emily had heard before. "Don't trust them." Lillian's eyes filled with tears. "It's Lily." The cockpit doors suddenly rattled, and the pilot's voice came over the intercom, sharp and firm. "Flight attendants, report immediately to your stations. All passengers remain seated." Grace appeared at the doorway, urgency written across her face. "They're initiating a lockdown protocol," she said. "Something's wrong." Emily, Lillian, and Harrison exchanged glances. Whatever secret the airline was hiding was bigger than they thought. Lily's warnings were real, and the danger was closing in. As the plane's hum deepened, and the cabin lights dimmed to a tense red glow, Emily felt a surge of determination. They had to uncover the truth, not just for Lily, but for everyone on this flight. The ghost in seat 14 was no longer a mystery. She was a warning, and the clock was ticking. The dim red glow that enveloped the cabin felt ominous, like the heartbeat of the plane itself was slowing, preparing for something unknown and dangerous. Emily, Lillian, and Harrison exchanged worried glances as Grace hurried toward them, her face etched with concern. "The lockdown protocol," Grace whispered urgently, "means the pilots suspect something is wrong, either inside the plane or out there. We need to move carefully." Emily tightened her grip on the bunny. It was more than a toy now. It was a symbol, a tether to a lost soul and the mystery that refused to fade. Harrison scanned the cabin discreetly. "There are cameras everywhere," he muttered. "We have to avoid the crew's attention until we figure out what's happening." Lillian's voice was steady but determined. "We have to find out what the airline is hiding, or Lily's warnings will mean nothing." They slipped down the aisle, eyes darting between passengers who looked confused, frightened, or oblivious. The seat 14B remained empty, but Emily could swear the atmosphere around it was charged, almost electric. Approaching the rear of the plane, Harrison pulled a folded map from his bag, an old maintenance schematic he'd managed to acquire. "There's a hidden compartment near the cargo hold behind the rear galley," he whispered. "If the airline is covering something up, that's where the records might be." Grace nodded. The galley staff had been acting strange all flight, avoiding eye contact, moving quickly when we get near. Emily took a deep breath. "Then that's where we go." Moving stealthily, the trio slipped past the rear galley and found a small panel near the floor, exactly as Harrison's map had indicated. Harrison crouched and produced a toolkit. Minutes later, the panel slid open, revealing a dusty storage space filled with boxes and old folders stamped with the airline's logo. Lillian's hands trembled as she reached in and pulled out a thick binder labeled Flight PX 379 Incident Reports. "This has to be it," she whispered. Emily flipped through pages filled with redacted documents, incident reports, and handwritten notes. Many referenced unexplained passenger disappearances, anonymous warnings, and quiet settlements. One report chilled her to the core. A letter dated 1997, the same year as the cockpit voice recorder incident, mentioned a child passenger unaccounted for and seat 14B unsold, yet occupied. The letter concluded with an order: all records to be sealed and incidents officially classified to prevent public panic. "They knew," Emily said quietly, "and they covered it up." Harrison pointed to a final section labeled Project Guardian. The page described a program to monitor and suppress paranormal phenomena linked to the airline's fleet, specifically focusing on a child apparition said to appear in seat 14B on multiple flights. The airline's goal was to contain any supernatural events that might threaten their reputation. "They tried to silence Lily," Lillian said, tears streaming down her face. "Not just her disappearance, but everything. They branded her a ghost story to keep passengers calm." Suddenly, an alarm blared, piercing the tense silence. Red lights flashed as a voice over the intercom commanded, "All passengers, remain calm. The lockdown is for your safety." The cabin doors locked with a mechanical thud. Emily looked at Grace, who was now gripping the armrest tightly. "This isn't over. We need to warn the others," Harrison said, urgency in his voice. "If the airline's secrets are dangerous, everyone on board is at risk." Emily stood, determination hardening inside her like steel. Lily's warnings were never just about her disappearance. Something is happening now, and we're the only ones who can stop it. The bunny in her hands seemed to pulse with quiet energy, as if acknowledging the weight of what lay ahead. Outside the plane, dark clouds gathered, the storm intensifying. Inside, the invisible war between truth and deception was about to reach its breaking point. Emily knew the next steps would be the hardest, because uncovering the past might just save the future. But it would take everything they had, and a courage none of them knew they possessed. The tension in the cabin was palpable as the lockdown secured every door and sealed the exits. Passengers whispered anxiously, eyes flicking toward the empty seat 14B, where Lily's presence seemed to linger like a shadow. Emily, Lillian, Harrison, and Grace huddled near the rear galley, their breaths shallow, minds racing. The evidence they'd uncovered was staggering. The airline's cover-up, the secret files, the silent war against the unseen. But now, that war was coming to them. We're not just dealing with a ghost, Harrison said quietly. There's something else on this plane. Something they're afraid of. What do you mean? Emily asked, clutching the bunny tighter. I've tracked strange electrical disruptions along the flight path, signals that interfere with navigation and communications. They call it the interference, but it's more than static. It's like an entity that feeds on fear and silence. Suddenly, the plane lurched, a shudder running through the fuselage. The cabin lights flickered, plunging briefly into darkness before emergency lights cast eerie shadows. A cold chill swept the aisle, as if the temperature itself had dropped. It's here, Grace whispered. The murmurs in the cabin grew louder, unease spreading like wildfire. Lillian's eyes welled with tears, but her voice was steady. Lily was warning us about this, the danger, the threat. Don't trust them, she meant not just the airline, but something bigger. We have to act fast, Emily said. If this entity can manipulate the plane's systems, it could put everyone at risk. Harrison pulled out a small device, an electromagnetic field reader he'd cobbled together from spare parts. The device beeped wildly as he moved down the aisle. It's stronger near 14B, he reported, but it's spreading. The crew, sensing the unrest, began to regain control of the situation. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but firm. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We're experiencing technical difficulties, but are managing the situation. Emily didn't believe him. The secrecy, the lockdown, it was all a facade. The real danger was invisible and growing. She looked at Lillian. We have to find a way to communicate with Lily, to understand what she wants, what she needs. Lillian nodded, clutching the bunny. There's an old ritual my grandmother taught me, a way to connect with spirits trapped between worlds. Harrison raised an eyebrow, but didn't dismiss it. At this point, I'm open to anything. In a quiet corner near the rear, Lillian began softly chanting, her voice trembling but steady. Emily and Harrison watched as the air seemed to shimmer around 14B, the empty seat now glowing faintly in the dim cabin light. Suddenly, a cold breeze brushed past them, and the faint outline of a little girl appeared, translucent and shimmering. Lily's eyes were sad but urgent. Help me, she whispered. Stop them. Emily stepped forward. Who are they, Lily? What are you trying to stop? The apparition's form flickered. They hide the truth. They silence the innocent. They want to keep the past buried, but it will come back to destroy. The plane groaned as if echoing her words, the engines faltering for a moment. Harrison looked at the readings, interference spikes, the plane's autopilot struggling to hold course. It's trying to break control, he said. We need to expose the airline's secrets now, or this entity will take full control. Emily nodded. We'll get the information out. We'll make sure the truth is known. The apparition smiled sadly, then faded away, leaving a chill but also a sense of hope. The fight was far from over, but now they had a guide. Lily's spirit, fragile but fierce, fighting for justice from beyond. As the plane continued its flight through the storm, Emily realized this was bigger than any one person. It was a battle between hidden lies and the courage to face them, between silence and the power of truth. And she was ready to fight. The apparition's fading presence left an uneasy calm, a fragile moment of clarity amidst the growing storm within the aircraft. Emily's resolve hardened as she realized the truth had to be exposed, no matter the cost. Lillian wiped her tears, her hands steady now as she gripped the bunny tightly. Harrison pulled out his phone, carefully switching it to airplane mode while connecting to the plane's in-flight Wi-Fi, which Harrison had discreetly accessed earlier. We need to send the documents, he said, the files we found in the hidden compartment. If the airline is trying to silence this, the world needs to see the truth. Emily nodded, watching the cabin carefully as passengers whispered nervously, the tension thick in the air. She knew time was limited. I'll start filming, Grace offered quietly, pulling out her phone. If we can capture something, anything, that shows what's really going on, it'll help. They moved quietly to the rear galley, where the panel remained open, the secret files still exposed. Harrison began scanning the pages with his phone, uploading images of the documents to a secure cloud drive. The process was slow, hampered by the unstable connection and the constant flicker of the plane's electrical system. Suddenly, the intercom crackled, the captain's voice once more. "We are currently experiencing technical difficulties. Please remain calm. Maintenance teams will be ready upon landing." Emily exchanged a glance with Lillian. "They're still lying?" Hours passed, each minute dragging like an eternity. Emily, Lillian, Harrison, and Grace worked silently, sharing information, piecing together the airline's long history of cover-ups and suppression. The files detailed disappearances, unreported sightings of the ghostly girl in 14B, and a shadowy program designed to keep passengers and the public in the dark. Then, a new message popped up on Harrison's phone, an encrypted email from an unknown sender. "It's from someone inside," Harrison said, eyes wide. "They've been watching us." The message contained coordinates and a password for an encrypted server holding even more damning evidence. Internal emails, hidden videos, and pilot testimonies confirming the airline's deliberate concealment of paranormal incidents. "This is it," Emily breathed. "The proof we need." But just as they prepared to download the files, the cabin lights flickered violently, plunging the plane into brief darkness. Passengers gasped. A low rumble vibrated through the fuselage. "What now?" Grace whispered. Suddenly, the plane jolted again, this time harder, throwing a few passengers against their seatbelts. The pilot's voice returned, strained but controlled. "Brace for turbulence. We're encountering severe weather." But Emily knew it was more than weather. The unseen force was fighting back. Harrison's device beeped furiously. "The entity is stronger than ever. It's trying to shut us down, to erase everything." Lillian stepped forward, her voice steady, filled with conviction. "We can't let fear win. Lily's spirit showed us the way. We have to break the silence." Emily started filming again, capturing the tense faces around her. The fear, the hope, the determination. "If this is the last thing we do, it'll be on record. The world will know." The plane shook violently once more, but this time, Emily felt a strange calm wash over her. The presence in 14B wasn't just a ghost anymore. It was a protector, a warning, a call to justice. And together, they would fight to make sure the truth was never hidden again. As the storm outside raged, inside the cabin, a quiet revolution was unfolding, one of courage, revelation, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. The storm outside battered the plane relentlessly, lightning flashing through the windows like nature's angry spotlight. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, the passengers subdued by fear and uncertainty. Emily, Lillian, Harrison, and Grace huddled near the rear galley, clutching the evidence that could expose the airline's dark secrets. The encrypted files from the anonymous insider had unlocked a new chapter. Hidden communications between high-level executives plotting to keep the paranormal incidents under wraps at any cost. Harrison's fingers flew over his phone, downloading video clips showing strange occurrences on past flights. Flickering lights, unexplained noises, even glimpses of the girl in seat 14 be appearing to other passengers. They weren't just hiding the truth, Harrison said grimly. They were actively suppressing it. Emily's heart pounded as she realized the magnitude of their discovery. This isn't just about Lily anymore. It's about everyone who's been silenced, erased, or forgotten. Suddenly, the cabin lights flickered violently, and the plane lurched sharply. A collective gasp rose from the passengers. The captain's voice came over the intercom, strained but steady. "We're experiencing severe turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Yet Emily sensed something else, an unnatural force at work, resisting the exposure of its secrets. The bunny in Lillian's hands seemed to pulse faintly, almost as if Lily's spirit was still near, offering strength. Harrison glanced nervously at his EMF reader, which was spiking with wild, erratic readings. Whatever this is, it's getting desperate. Grace took a deep breath. If the airline silence was a prison for Lily, then breaking that silence could free her and stop this. Emily nodded. We need to get these files to the authorities as soon as we land. But first, we have to survive this flight." Just then, the cockpit door creaked open unexpectedly. A flight attendant stepped out, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Captain wants to see you," she said, nodding toward the cockpit. Emily, Harrison, and Lillian exchanged worried looks. "This could be a trap," Harrison warned. But Grace took charge. "If they want a confrontation, we'll face it together." They cautiously made their way forward, passing anxious passengers and tense crew members. The cockpit door closed behind them with a definitive click. Inside, the pilot and co-pilot sat tensely, their faces drawn and serious. The pilot fixed Emily with a hard stare. "You've been digging where you shouldn't," he said quietly. "There are things you don't understand, things that can't be explained." Emily held her ground. "We understand enough to know you've been hiding the truth. People have disappeared, been silenced, and you've kept us all in the dark." The pilot's expression flickered, a mix of anger and fear. "This isn't just a story, it's a warning. The girl in 14B, she's a guardian, not a ghost. But she's also a symptom of something far worse." "What do you mean?" Lillian asked, voice shaking but resolute. The pilot hesitated, then lowered his voice. "There's a force tied to the plane's history, a darkness born from greed and lies. The airline tried to suppress it, but it won't stay buried. Lily's spirit is fighting to protect everyone on board, but the longer the secrets remain, the stronger the danger becomes." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Then help us," she said. "Help us end this, for Lily, for everyone." The pilot looked away for a moment before nodding slowly. "We're running out of time." Outside, the storm intensified, but inside the cockpit, a fragile alliance was forming. Together, they would face the unseen enemy, break the silence, and finally bring the truth to light. The storm's fury outside mirrored the turmoil inside the cabin as the plane soared through turbulent skies. Emily, Lillian, Harrison, Grace, and the pilot stood united by a fragile bond forged through shared desperation and the need for truth. The encrypted files and hidden documents had exposed the airline's darkest secrets, but now they faced a more immediate threat: the mysterious force linked to Lily's spirit and the haunting of Seat 14B. The pilots revealed that the force was a manifestation of decades of corporate greed, betrayal, and suppressed tragedies, an entity that fed on secrecy and fear, growing stronger with each cover-up. The plane's systems flickered erratically, autopilot struggling against invisible currents pulling it off course. Harrison monitored the EMF device, its readings spiking dangerously. "It's like the plane itself is fighting us," he said, voice tense. "We have to find a way to calm the entity before it's too late." Lillian stepped forward, clutching the bunny tighter. "Lily's spirit gave us the courage and the clues. Now it's up to us to finish what she started." Emily's gaze hardened with resolve. "We'll do whatever it takes." The cabin was eerily silent except for the hum of machinery and the occasional creak of the airframe. Passengers sat motionless, trusting, hoping, unaware of the full extent of the battle unfolding around them. Grace documented everything, capturing the raw fear and hope, knowing this story had to reach the world. The pilots coordinated a plan to stabilize the plane manually, but required a delicate balance of technical skill and confronting the force directly. Emily, Lillian, and Harrison prepared for the ritual Lillian had learned from her grandmother, a spiritual plea to the guardian spirit and a call to release the trapped souls bound by the airline's dark past. The plane's lights dimmed as the ritual began, Lillian chanting softly, the bunny glowing faintly in her hands. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the cabin, and the faint apparition of Lily appeared once more, her eyes filled with both sorrow and hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing softly. "You've given me a chance." The plane trembled violently as the force surged, pushing back against the ritual. But the unity of those aboard, fueled by truth and courage, held firm. The pilots regained control, steadying the plane. The entity's presence faded, leaving behind a peaceful calm. The storm outside began to clear, the first rays of dawn breaking through the clouds. Emily looked around at the faces of her companions and passengers. Relief, exhaustion, and a newfound sense of freedom in their eyes. The mystery of Seat 14B was no longer a haunting curse, but a story of courage, truth, and justice. As the plane descended toward its destination, Emily realized that some spirits never truly leave. They live on in the bravery of those who remember and speak their truth. And with that, the final flight became not an end, but a new beginning. As the airplane began its descent toward the airport, a calm settled over the cabin, unlike anything the passengers had felt since boarding. Outside, the early morning sun pierced the dissipating clouds, casting warm golden light through the windows and bathing the interior in a gentle glow. Emily stood near the empty seat 14B, her gaze lingering on the spot where Lily's spirit had appeared so vividly. Though the girl was gone now, her presence had transformed the entire flight, turning fear into determination, silence into revelation. The pilots announced over the intercom that all systems were stable and that they expected a smooth landing despite the earlier chaos. Relief rippled through the cabin, but Emily knew the story was far from over. The files and videos they had secretly transmitted to journalists and authorities during the flight were already beginning to surface online. Social media buzzed with speculation, screenshots, and leaked documents exposing the airline's decades-long cover-up. As the plane touched down with a gentle thud, passengers quietly applauded, some tears glistening in their eyes. Lillian hugged Emily tightly, her bunny clutched close as if it too breathed a sigh of relief. "We did it," she whispered. "We brought her story to light." Outside the plane, waiting emergency crews and news vans created a flurry of activity. Reporters scrambled to gather statements, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. But Emily and her companions chose to stay together, preparing for the inevitable storm of attention. Harrison's phone buzzed nonstop with incoming messages from investigative journalists, whistleblowers, and concerned citizens. "This is going viral," he said, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his voice. Grace, capturing the moment with her camera, said softly, "Lily's story will finally be heard. And maybe, just maybe, it will change things." The airline issued a carefully worded statement acknowledging unforeseen events on the flight, but denying any wrongdoing. However, public pressure mounted rapidly as more victims came forward, emboldened by the revelations. Emily reflected on the journey, the fear, the discoveries, the spirit that guided them. Lily's story was not just about a ghost on a plane. It was about the courage to confront truth, the power of unity in the face of oppression, and the importance of remembering those who cannot speak for themselves. In the days that followed, Emily and her friends worked closely with authorities, helping to unravel the airline's shadowy history and ensure justice for those affected. The haunting of Seat 14B became a symbol, a beacon of hope, and a warning against silence. As media coverage intensified, Emily received messages from passengers around the world, sharing their own stories of unexplained encounters and urging transparency. The world was waking up, and through it all, the memory of Lily remained, a fragile light in the darkness, reminding everyone that no secret could stay hidden forever. The final flight had landed not just on a runway, but in the hearts of countless people ready to listen, to believe, and to change. The days after the flight were a whirlwind of media attention, investigations, and public outcry. Emily, Lillian, Harrison, and Grace found themselves thrust into the spotlight, not as celebrities, but as truth-tellers and advocates for justice. The airline, once untouchable, was now under scrutiny from federal agencies, journalists, and passengers demanding accountability. The encrypted files, whistleblower testimonies, and footage of strange phenomena had sparked a global conversation about safety, transparency, and the unexplained. But amidst the chaos, Emily found solace in the quiet moments, reflecting on the journey, the spirit of Lily, and the power of courage. She visited the small memorial that had been created near the airport, a tribute to all those lost and forgotten, with a single empty seat painted in bright colors. Lillian held her hand tightly, the bunny dangling from her wrist like a talisman. "She's free now," Lillian said softly, her voice filled with hope. "Because of us." The airline was forced to overhaul its safety protocols, investigate previous incidents thoroughly, and cooperate fully with authorities. Passengers previously silenced began to share their stories, creating a wave of change across the industry. The haunting of Seat 14B had become a catalyst, not just for justice, but for compassion and remembrance. Emily knew their fight was far from over, but she also knew the importance of this moment. The fear that once gripped the cabin had been replaced by a profound sense of connection, a reminder that even the smallest voices matter. At a press conference, Emily spoke passionately about the need for honesty, vigilance, and empathy. "We can't turn away from the unknown," she said, "but we can face it together with courage and truth." Meanwhile, Harrison continued his research into electromagnetic anomalies and unexplained phenomena, determined to find scientific answers that could support the stories they'd uncovered. Grace's videos and photos went viral, sparking art exhibits and documentaries that celebrated the courage of those aboard the flight. And Lillian, inspired by her grandmother's wisdom and Lily's spirit, dedicated herself to helping families affected by mysterious disappearances, ensuring they were never forgotten. One quiet evening, Emily sat by the window of her apartment, the city lights twinkling below. She felt a gentle warmth in her pocket, the bunny that Lillian had given her. Holding it close, she smiled, knowing that the story of Seat 14B was no longer a haunting, but a legacy. A legacy of truth, bravery, and hope. The empty seat that once symbolized silence had become a beacon, a new beginning for all who dared to listen. And somewhere beyond the stars, Emily believed, Lily's spirit watched over them all, finally at peace. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the mystery of Seat 14B. This story reminds us that sometimes the most haunting truths are the ones we must face together, with courage, honesty, and compassion. If you found yourself drawn into the tale, moved by the bravery of those who dare to speak out, please consider subscribing to the channel to follow more stories that uncover the unseen and the unheard. Your thoughts and feelings matter. Leave a comment below to share your opinion or any similar experiences you might have had. Together, we can keep these stories alive, shine light into the shadows, and honor those who can no longer speak for themselves. Until next time, stay curious and stay brave.